Hi again, 7th graders. Another little bit confusing lesson, so I'm just going to read through it and go over it with you. The First Men in the Moon, mood and sensory language. Now, before looking through this video and listening to everything, you should have read Chapter 19 of The First Men in the Moon. You can do that by clicking on the blue link in your assignment. If you haven't done that yet, stop this recording and go read that and then come back. So our vocabulary, we have 4 vocabulary words for this assignment. Desiccated means destroyed or laid waste. Okay, so in a war, say a bomb might have desiccated an area. So it would have destroyed or wasted the area. Inexorable means unavoidable or unstoppable. You could say that maybe a hurricane is inexorable, it's unstoppable. Languor is characterized by sluggishness or laziness. Sometimes on a hot summer day, you might be languorous. You might be lazy on a hot summer day. Sluggish. Mood is the feeling created by the author's sensory language and word choice. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about mood and see what feeling is created in different parts of the story. So, how authors set a mood. Have you ever turned on the radio and heard a song that made you want to get out of your seat and dance? What about a ballad that was so sad you found yourself wanting to cry? You've probably realized that songwriters and musicians are experts in the art of setting a mood. You may not have noticed, however, is that authors use the same technique to create certain emotions in the stories you read. Mood in literature refers to the emotion created by the author's word choice. An author uses sensory language, imagery, and figures of speech to create a mood in a work. While there is usually one dominant mood in a work of literature, authors may shift moods in the same way they shift between different settings in a book. To understand this, think about the comical scene where Mr. Caver is blown from his house and ends up covered in mud. Next, consider the scene where Mr. Bedford and Mr. Caver say their goodbyes as they split up to hunt for the sphere. How is the author able to create a humorous mood in one scene and a gloomy mood in another? You might be thinking about their word choices. A little more vocabulary. Connotation here refers to the feeling associated with a word. We're going to talk about positive connotations and negative connotations. So, a positive connotation would be something, a good feeling associated with a word. A negative connotation would be bad things associated with a word. So in order to detect the mood of a particular scene, you will have to use your inferencing skills. Okay, so that means reading and figuring out by context. Notice the connotation of words an author uses. Visualize the pictures a writer creates with his words. Try to understand the author's purpose for using figurative language in a scene. To describe a mood of work, use adjectives that express a certain emotion. The list below provides some words to get you started. So, words to describe mood. Some positive connotation words, and these are by no means all, are joyous, romantic, playful, peaceful, idyllic, humorous, cheerful, optimistic, euphoric, which means really, really happy, idealistic, tender, and warm. Okay, all of those words bring to mind something good, good feelings. Now, words with negative connotations could be desolate, horrific, isolated, sarcastic, barren, haunting, bleak, deserted, hostile, ominous, perilous, and threatening. Those words have kind of bad feelings associated with them. So, decoding descriptive language, word choice. In order to understand how authors use word connotation to create a mood, let's examine the first lines of chapter 19. In a little while it seemed to me as though I had always been alone on the moon. I hunted for a time with a certain intentness, but the heat was still very great, and the thinness of the air felt like a hoop about one's chest. I came presently into a hollow basin bristling with tall, brown, dry fronds about its edge, and I sat down under these to rest and cool. Notice that the bold words all have a negative connotation. Okay, I'm going to read the bold words again. Alone, hunted, thinness, heat, hollow, brown, dry. This description works to create a gloomy mood, as Mr. Bedford realizes he is utterly alone. Okay? Figurative language. There are also several places where the author uses colorful language to create a comical mood. In chapter 13, notice how the simile used creates a humorous picture of Mr. Bedford and Mr. Caver. It had the same laxness in texture that all organic structures seem to have upon the moon. It tasted rather like a gopher or a damp meringue. Okay, kind of a mushy cake thing, but in no way disagreeable. I took 2 other mouthfuls. I wanted food, I said, tearing off a still larger piece. For a time we ate with an utter absence of self-consciousness. We ate and presently drank like tramps in a soup kitchen. Okay, the bolded words, we ate and presently drank like tramps in a soup kitchen. Okay, that is a simile. That means they were so hungry they just ate anything really fast. Okay, tramps is in H.G. Wells's time might mean someone like a homeless person. So if you think of a homeless person in a that's going into a soup kitchen or shelter, they might be really hungry and just eat and drink everything. So that's how figurative language is used to create mood. Sensory language. Some descriptions are written with sensory language, used to stimulate the reader's sense of touch, taste, smell, sight, or sound. Sensory means using all your senses. That makes sense, doesn't it? It helps to take a moment to visualize these scenes while trying to picture what the character is experiencing in that moment. I was in a state of hysterical agitation, trembling violently, and quite breathless long before I got to it. 3 times at least I had to stop to wash, or had to stop with my hands resting on my side, and in spite of the thin dryness of the air, the perspiration was wet upon my face. Remember that perspiration is sweat. In this description, the reader can imagine that what Bedford is feeling as he searches for the sphere. He trembles with nervousness. Breathless, he stops to rest. The air is thin and dry, and the perspiration is wet on his face. All of these descriptions appeal to one of the reader's 5 senses, making it easier to empathize with Mr. Bedford. Okay, so if you're trembling, you're feeling something. If you're breathless, you're feeling it. If you're feeling the air that's thin and dry, wet perspiration, that's all sensory language using your sense of touch, your feeling. All right, let's talk a little about sound and rhythm. Here's a vocabulary word for you, onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia refers to a word that imitates a sound, like buzz, or rattle, or boom. Another method used by authors to create a mood in a story is to include words that mimic sounds and rhythm. An author might use onomatopoeia or craft short, choppy sentences to create this effect. Remember when Mr. Bedford and Mr. Caver first realized that there is a noise echoing beneath their feet in chapter 10? Boom, boom, boom. It came from beneath our feet, a sound in the earth. We seemed to hear it with our feet as much as with our ears. Its dull resonance was muffled by distance, thick with the quality of intervening substance. No sound that I can imagine could have astonished us more or have changed more completely the quality of things about us. For this rich, slow, and deliberate sound seemed to us as though it could be nothing but the striking of some gigantic buried clock. Boom, boom, boom. What mood is created by the infusion of a sound like that of a huge ticking clock here in the story? Let's think. What mood could be created? Do you think they would be happy about that? They might be surprised. It might make them anxious or nervous. Finding the right meaning. Sometimes the language that an author uses is difficult to understand because the words take on unusual meanings in the text. This is sometimes true when the story was written a long time ago, as this story was. Or perhaps an author wanted to create a unique image for the reader. A good reader realizes that one word may have different denotations or definitions. Part of the reader's job is to use the context of a story to decide which meaning is intended by the author. Let's look at an example. We looked at each other's drawn faces in blank consternation. "They can't know what it is to be giddy," said Caver. "It's quite impossible for us to walk that plank." In a dictionary, we can find 3 definitions for the word giddy. It could mean silly, nauseated, and unsteady. In this case, we can apply the context. Mr. Bedford and Mr. Caver are terrified at the idea of walking across this long and narrow bridge, and we can infer that the author's intended meaning is unsteady. Okay, because they're not really feeling nauseated about it, they're not being silly. But yeah, since they're saying it's quite impossible for us to walk that plank, the meaning there is unsteady. So let's review a little bit. Because a writer's world is based on words, knowing how to understand sensory language and figurative speech is important for a reader. Likewise, being aware of the various shifts in mood that an author creates is essential to comprehending the meaning of a text. As you read, be mindful of areas where meaning is not clear in the story. Use context, make inferences, and visualize in order to gain an understanding of the text. Okay, now you're going to go on to your questions, and good luck with the rest of it. Let me know if you need anything. Bye.